At dinner, my brother smirked, still single, yeah? Must be sad being a loser. My parents laughed, so I grinned and said, rich talk from a guy whose rent I've covered for 3 years. That ends today, by the way. My world shattered over roast chicken and red wine. I never thought a single dinner could rewrite my entire family history, but that night, everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and betrayal came crashing down. The air in my childhood home in Denver was thick with the usual blend of my mother Eleanor's overly ambitious cooking and my father Arthur's forced cheer. I'm Ethan, 31, a software developer. Nothing glamorous, but I'm good at it. I make a comfortable living, enjoy quiet mornings, and tinker with old video games. I'm single, not because I'm undateable, but because I decided peace was better than settling after a messy breakup years ago. This never sat well with my parents. See, my younger brother, Caleb, 28, is the golden child. He's got that greasy car salesman charm, always talking loud about how busy or important he is, even when he's, let's just say, between engagements. Eleanor dotes on him, calling him a late bloomer even after he totaled 3 cars and ghosted 2 landlords. Arthur pretends to be tough but always slips Caleb a $100 bill when he thinks no one's looking. I used to be angry, but I'd grown numb. Actually, I was quietly helping him. 3 years ago, after another eviction, I started covering part of his rent, under the agreement he'd pay me back. I kept it a secret, just sending money each month. Foolish, I know. This dinner wasn't supposed to be dramatic. Eleanor's idea. We never see you anymore, she'd texted, laced with guilt. It would mean a lot to your father. I almost declined. I had a stressful project going live, and honestly, I didn't have the energy for the usual passive-aggressive comments. But guilt is a powerful thing. So, I showed up, bottle of wine in hand. Dinner began as expected. Polite chatter about work, weather. Arthur asked about my job, then cut me off to ask Caleb if he was still talking to that recruiter in Dallas. Caleb, of course, launched into a dramatic story about almost landing a 6-figure role, needing more niche experience or something. Smoke and mirrors. Eleanor beamed at him. I was chewing a piece of chicken when it happened. Caleb leaned back, sipped his wine, and looked at me with that smug grin he wears like cologne. Still single, huh? He said, casual. Must be lonely being a failure. He chuckled. Like it was a harmless joke. Like it wasn't a deliberate shot in front of our parents, who both gave soft, knowing laughs, as if he'd just said something clever instead of cruel. My fork was halfway to my mouth. Heartbeat suddenly loud. For a second, I just stared, wondering how someone could say that, especially after everything I'd done for him. The jobs I'd passed on, the vacations I didn't take, the countless times I said yes when I should have screamed. I felt heat rising in my neck. My first instinct was to laugh it off, but something in me snapped. Quietly. Cleanly. Like a thread breaking. I set my fork down, wiped my mouth with my napkin, and looked my brother dead in the eye. Funny coming from a guy whose rent I've paid for 3 years. Not anymore, by the way. You could have heard a pin drop. Caleb's face froze, the smirk evaporating. Eleanor's mouth fell open in slow motion. Arthur set his wine glass down a little too hard. The silence was deafening. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt something sharp, cold, and strangely satisfying settle in my chest. Control. That was just the beginning. That wasn't revenge, it was a warning shot. A single crack in the dam. I didn't know it yet, but that dinner would become the turning point. The way my family saw me, the way I saw myself, and the way all our dirty little secrets came tumbling out. Eleanor was the first to break the silence, though she didn't so much speak as gasp. Ethan, she hissed, why would you say something like that? I just looked at her, calm, quiet. I wasn't angry, just done. Caleb, meanwhile, was still frozen, smugness replaced with confusion. He looked like a magician whose trick failed mid-performance. I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered, glancing at our parents. Ethan's exaggerating. Am I? I said, folding my napkin. Because I've got the bank records if you need a refresher. Every month on time, like clockwork. Arthur cleared his throat sharply. The universal dad signal for enough. He hated confrontations. We don't need to rehash all that at the dinner table, he said, not looking at me. Of course not. When Caleb makes a dig, it's just boys being boys. When I state facts, it's inappropriate. I leaned back and smiled politely. Right. Sorry. I forgot we don't talk about actual problems here. Eleanor stood up then, flustered, grabbing my plate. Why don't I get dessert? She said too brightly, voice wobbling. I made that lemon tart you like. I'm not really hungry anymore, I replied. And the second the words left my mouth, I saw the flicker of hurt in her eyes. I didn't want to hurt her. She was my mother. But somewhere, she'd stopped being a mom and started being a PR manager for my brother's failures. Every gathering, every conversation, filtered through Caleb first. His victories paraded. My stability ignored. I'd spent years as the quiet, reliable background character, and I was just supposed to keep smiling. That night, I left early. Didn't say goodbye, didn't hug anyone. I got in my car and just sat there, watching the lights in the living room flicker. I thought about all the birthdays I'd spent organizing gifts for both of us while Caleb forgot mine entirely. The time he totaled his car, and I lent him mine for 6 months without asking for gas money. The week Arthur had surgery and I took time off work while Caleb showed up 2 days late with a hangover. It wasn't just the rent. It was everything. 1,000 tiny moments that had piled up until I couldn't tell where the resentment ended and my spine began. The next morning, I got a text from Eleanor, "We need to talk." That was really uncalled for last night. Not "how are you feeling," or "I didn't realize." No, my behavior was the problem. I didn't reply. Over the next few days, the silence grew heavy. No Sunday check-in. No guilt-trippy recipe photos. I should have felt guilty, but instead, I felt something close to relief. For once, the emotional labor wasn't mine. I went to work. Hit the gym. Cleaned my apartment, listened to old jazz, and watched a documentary on mountain climbers who risked their lives to stand alone at the top of the world. For the first time, I understood the appeal. Then, Thursday, Caleb called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hey," he said, his voice strained. "Can we talk?" "I think we're doing that now," I replied, pouring coffee, keeping my tone neutral. There was a pause. I didn't know you felt that way," he said finally. "If you were struggling, you could have just told me." That made me laugh. "You're serious?" I said, sitting down. "I was struggling, Caleb. I was covering your rent because you begged me to. You promised you'd pay me back. You told me not to tell Eleanor and Arthur because you were handling it like a man. And then you mocked me at dinner in front of them. That's not struggling. That's using me." "I didn't mean it like that," he muttered. "No, you meant it exactly like that. You wanted the applause without doing the work. And you've always gotten it. That's not my fault, but I'm done pretending I don't see it." He was quiet. "So what? You're cutting me off?" "Yep," I said. "On you now. Grow up." He hung up. I expected backlash. Anger. What I didn't expect was the campaign that followed. First came the calls from Eleanor. "Caleb's been having a really hard time, Ethan. He's not as strong as you are. He just needs a little more time." Then the group texts, Caleb got a flat tire on his way to a job interview. Can anyone help? Caleb's apartment might have mold. Do you know any lawyers? Caleb's feeling really low today. Just letting you boys know. Every message was a pebble tossed into my shoes. Small, annoying, but impossible to ignore. It was pressure dressed up as family concern. Emotional blackmail with a smiley face. At one point, Eleanor called me at work and actually said, "You're being really selfish right now." Selfish? The word made my skin crawl. I'd given so much time, money, peace of mind. And now that I wasn't giving more, I was the problem. I'm not selfish, I said calmly. I'm just not a doormat. Click. A few days later, I got a notification from Venmo. Caleb requested $800. Just the word please in the memo. I didn't respond. An hour later, he texted, "Really? After everything I've done for you?" That one sent me into a full-blown spiral. I paced my apartment, trying to wrap my head around the sheer gall of it. Everything he's done for me? Like what? Borrow my headphones and never return them? Crash on my couch for a week that turned into 3 months? My therapist once told me that narcissists rewrite history to suit their version of events, and if you're not careful, they'll make you doubt your own memories. I used to think she was dramatic. Now, I wasn't so sure. The final straw came a week later. Saturday. Noon. A knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, there stood Eleanor, wearing a look of wounded disappointment so practiced it could be bottled and sold. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, stepping past me without waiting for permission. I came to talk. Face to face. About what? I asked, baffled. She looked at me, eyes already brimming. Caleb's been struggling again. He might lose his apartment. He told me you cut him off and now he's behind on bills. He's embarrassed. He didn't want me to come, but I had to. He made a mistake, Ethan. But we help family. That's what we do. You've always been the responsible one, the strong one. Please, just until he's back on his feet. I sat down across from her, letting the weight of her words settle like dust. You want me to keep paying for his lifestyle because he's too proud to admit he's never grown up? I said slowly. You want me to undo the only boundary I've ever set because it makes you uncomfortable? Her lips tightened. That's not fair. No, it's not, I said. None of this has ever been fair. But I'm not playing along anymore. She stared at me. Then stood up. I hope you can live with yourself, she said coldly, and walked out. No hug, no goodbye. Just the heavy click of the door closing. I sat there for a long time. No music, no distractions, just silence and the creeping realization that something fundamental had shifted. Not just in my family dynamic, but in me. For the first time in my life, I'd said no and meant it. No caveats, no apologies. And that was when I realized they weren't just upset because I stopped helping. They were upset because they never thought I'd stop. But oh, they were in for a surprise. A week passed. No calls, no texts, no unexpected door knocks. For the first time in months, maybe years, there was silence. And silence, as it turns out, can be both comforting and terrifying. I thought I'd feel free, liberated. Instead, I found myself watching my phone like a ticking bomb, waiting for the next guilt trip. But nothing came. At first, I assumed they were giving me space. Maybe reflecting. I even felt a bit of hope. Foolish in hindsight. Because the silence wasn't space. It was strategy. They weren't retreating. They were regrouping. It started with a call from Aunt Carol, my Eleanor's sister, the unofficial family gossip line. Her loyalty was with my mother. When her name popped up, I hesitated. Answering it felt like walking into a script. "Hi, sweetheart," she chirped, overly cheerful. "Got a minute?" I braced myself. "Sure. What's up?" "Oh, I was just talking to Eleanor the other day. She's so worried about you. Said you've been distant, cold." I told her, that doesn't sound like Ethan. He's always been such a sweetheart. "Aha," I said. "Well, things have been a little tense lately." "Oh, I heard," she said in that sugary tone people use right before a character assassination. "About the money, you poor thing. You've always been so generous. It must be hard feeling like no one appreciates you." That caught me off guard. "Thanks," I said slowly. "But honey," she added gently, "you know your brother's had a hard life. All those ups and downs. It's just who he is. You can't change him." "And your mother?" "Well, she's always tried her best, hasn't she? Maybe she doesn't always say the right thing, but she's only human." And there it was. The subtle shift, from "you were right" to "be the bigger person." "I'm not trying to change anyone," I said. "I'm just done sacrificing my peace for people who don't respect me." She sighed. Of course, of course. I just hope you don't let one little family spat turn into something bigger. You know how time slips by? People grow old. Regrets pile up." I didn't say anything. This was a message, guilt-wrapped, from Eleanor herself. They'd enlisted the cavalry. The family charm offensive had begun. Over the next few days, it snowballed. My cousin texted, "Are you okay?" An old family friend commented on Facebook, "Families fight, but love wins." I even got an email from my uncle, subject line, "Just some thoughts," filled with a long-winded essay about forgiveness and how holding grudges makes you bitter. It was surreal, like they'd formed a campaign committee. But I kept quiet. I didn't argue. I just watched it all unfold, growing more disillusioned. Until the betrayal came. It was a Friday afternoon. I had just wrapped up a long Zoom call when I got a call from my landlord. Odd. He rarely called. "Ethan," he said, tense. "I just wanted to give you a heads up. Your brother dropped by today." My stomach tightened. "Caleb, yeah. Said you'd given him permission to come by and pick up some stuff. Said he'd lost his key and needed access. He seemed convincing. Had your last name, your address, everything." "What?" I said sharply, already standing. "What did he take?" "Nothing, luckily," the landlord said hesitantly. "My maintenance guy happened to be here and called me just in case. I told him to hold off. Figured I should check with you first." I stood there stunned. Caleb tried to break into my apartment using my name, our relationship. Not even to confront me, just to sneak in. My voice was cold. "Thank you for calling me." He absolutely did not have permission. "If he comes by again, don't let him in. And please call the police if he pushes it." The landlord sighed. I figured it might be something like that. Family drama. I hung up and stared at the wall. My heart beat loud, not from fear, but from fury. That was the line. This wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't about snide remarks or favoritism or even emotional manipulation. This was violating trust. And I knew exactly where he'd gotten the idea. Eleanor. Not directly, maybe, but I could feel her fingerprints on it. The desperation, the entitlement, the assumption that I wouldn't do anything about it, that I'd fold like I always had. They thought I'd bark. They didn't think I'd bite. I called Caleb immediately. He didn't pick up. Again. Voicemail. On the third try, he answered, groggy and defensive. Yo, you tried to get into my apartment. Pause. Then a scoff. What? No. My landlord called me. Said you claimed I gave you permission. Another pause. I just needed to grab something, he said finally, like that justified it. I left a few things there last year. You said I could come back for them anytime. Last year? Not today. And not without telling me. You tried to lie your way into my home, Caleb. Oh, come on, man. Don't be dramatic. My hands clenched into fists. You trespassed. If the maintenance guy hadn't been there, you might have gotten in. What then? You start going through my things? Steal from me? Crash on my couch again? You're blowing this out of proportion, he snapped. You think you're so perfect now, huh? Just because you've got a little money and your own place. I earned all of it, I said, voice shaking. While you were wasting chances and burning bridges, I was working. And I kept helping you. Even when you didn't deserve it. And this is what you do. He didn't answer. So, I hung up. Then, I blocked him. Not just on my phone, on everything. Social media, email, even our shared family Spotify plan. Petty, maybe, but symbolic. I was done pretending we were brothers in any meaningful way. Blood means nothing without trust. Then I texted Eleanor, Caleb tried to break into my apartment today. This is no longer about money. This is about safety. I've blocked him. Please respect my boundaries, or I will go no contact with you, too. No reply. Not for hours. And when it finally came, it said, you know, your brother didn't mean any harm. Don't destroy this family over a misunderstanding. That was it. No apology, no outrage, no motherly concern that her younger son had tried to deceive his way into her older son's home. Just a plea to not destroy the family. As if it hadn't been slowly corroding for years. As if I was the one holding a match, not standing in the ashes. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake replaying every moment, every red flag I ignored. Every time I'd brushed off the favoritism as just how it is. They didn't care about me. They cared about keeping the machine running. And now that I'd stopped fueling it, they were ready to let me go. But I wasn't going to slink away quietly. No, I had a plan. And it was time to let them see what happened when the failure stopped playing nice. I won't lie to you. After that last message from Eleanor, something inside me cracked. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but quieter, more hollow. Like discovering your favorite childhood book was full of pages you'd never noticed, and they all painted you as the villain. I sat on my couch that night in the dark, just the faint glow of the street lamp bleeding through. I don't know how long I sat there, but when I finally stood, my legs felt heavy. Not physically, emotionally. It's strange how grief works. Because that's what it was, grief. Not for a person, but for the idea of something. The idea that your family is supposed to be your anchor. And when you realize they're not, when you finally admit they never really were, it feels like a death. I didn't go to work the next day. I called in sick and stayed in bed until noon. My mind was a swamp. No clear thoughts, no anger, just a weight. But eventually, routine won. It always does. I got up. Ate cold leftover pasta. Showered. And then I sat back down at my desk and opened a blank document. I didn't know what I was going to type. I just needed to do something. What came out wasn't a letter. It was a list. A list of everything I'd done for Caleb over the past 10 years. Apartment rent, $800 a month for 36 months. $28,800. Car repair when he crashed into a mailbox, $2,400. Paid off his credit card, $5,100. Countless dinners, gas fill-ups, Uber rides, emergency bailouts, conservatively, $3,000 more. Total, $39,300. And that was just the financial part. There was no column for emotional labor. No line item for all the times I stood between him and Arthur's rage. No valuation for the countless times I bit my tongue while he made me the punchline. No invoice for the weekends I spent helping him move or rewrite his resume. I stared at the number, nearly $40,000. That could have been a new car, a vacation, a down payment, a life. And I'd handed it over piece by piece like it was candy. The worst part? He never once said thank you. Not meaningfully. Maybe a casual thanks, bro, usually followed by I'll get you back, but never eye contact, never acknowledgement, never accountability. The rest of that week was a blur. I went back to work, but kept my head down. Declined happy hours, skipped gym sessions, turned off social media. My phone vibrated, but I didn't check it. Every notification felt like a dagger. But the world doesn't stop spinning. On Monday, my boss pulled me aside. "You okay?" he asked gently. I nodded. "Just a rough week." He didn't press. "Take Friday off. Use it as a mental health day." I nearly teared up. Not just because I needed the day, but because he noticed. My boss, with 50 other employees, noticed. And my own mother had responded to a potential break-in with, "Don't destroy this family." That contrast haunted me. So, I took Friday off, but not to mope. I drove 2 hours north of Denver to a lake I used to visit as a teenager. Just a secluded spot near a worn-out dock. I packed a sandwich, a notebook, and a blanket. No music, no laptop. Just me and the sound of wind. I sat by the water for hours, and somewhere between sandwich bites and a failed attempt at skipping a stone, I decided something. I was done reacting, done enduring. Done smiling through it, minimizing my discomfort to keep the peace, making myself smaller so others didn't feel inadequate. I was the nice one, the responsible one, the one who didn't need anything. But that wasn't strength. It was self-erasure. And now I was going to rewrite that. It started small. I canceled the shared Spotify family plan. Changed my Netflix password, removed every device. Updated my bank account security questions. Called my landlord to put a note in my file, "Do not let anyone access my unit unless confirmed by voice." I even reached out to a lawyer I'd met at a conference, not for legal action yet, but to ask, what would it take to legally distance myself from family? What protections existed if a sibling became a threat? She was helpful, not alarmed. She sounded like she'd had this conversation before. That alone comforted me. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. This wasn't some petty feud. This was survival. Around that time, something strange happened. Caleb disappeared. Radio silence. No texts, no calls, no random Venmo requests. For a moment, I thought maybe he'd finally gotten the message. Moved on. Or maybe Eleanor had reined him in. But I should have known better. Caleb doesn't disappear unless he's planning something. And I was about to find out just how deep that rabbit hole went. The first sign came through LinkedIn. A colleague messaged me with a screenshot. "Hey man, weird question. Didn't your brother apply here last year? Thought you'd want to see this." The screenshot was Caleb's profile. The bio now listed him as a freelance software consultant with experience in AI development, product management, and back-end architecture. 3 projects listed underneath, "My projects," from my portfolio, with altered dates and company names. He'd literally stolen my work, phrased it like his own, even quoted some of the language I'd used in a past conference talk. Word for word. I stared at the screen, pulse pounding. For a second, I thought it was a glitch. But no, it was intentional. Caleb had turned himself into a watered-down version of me, a Frankenstein's monster stitched together with pieces of my accomplishments. And suddenly, I knew why he'd gone quiet. He wasn't gone. He was becoming. I messaged him. Not to scold, not to confront. Just, you need to take my work off your profile. Now. No reply. I gave it an hour. Then I emailed the companies he listed, most of which I'd consulted for, and sent them my original work with timestamps. One responded immediately. The VP wrote, "Thanks for flagging this." That name sounded familiar. "We'll handle it." I didn't know what handle it meant, but I trusted it would make a dent. The other shoe dropped 2 days later when I got a call from Eleanor. "What did you do?" she snapped. No greeting. "Excuse me?" "Caleb said you got him blacklisted. He was just trying to build a new career. He admired your work. He thought you'd be proud." I almost laughed. Proud? He impersonated me, Eleanor. He stole from me. "You always twist things," she hissed. "No wonder no one wants to be around you anymore." And with that, she hung up. No wonder. That one stuck with me. Not "I'm disappointed." Not "that was wrong." But no wonder. It was the first time I realized she'd made her choice. There was no middle ground anymore. No mother torn between sons. Just a woman protecting her favorite, and a man realizing he was now free. Because once you've hit rock bottom with the people who raised you, there's a strange clarity that settles in. You stop hoping for the apology. You stop rewriting your past and you start writing your future. Quietly. Strategically. No fanfare. You simply begin. It's funny how rock bottom, once it settles beneath your feet, can become solid ground. I'd spent years running on a treadmill of guilt and obligation. Always feeling like I was one favor away from finally being accepted. But now that the treadmill had stopped, now that I'd stepped off it for good, I realized how much energy I'd been wasting just to stand still. And once I stopped pouring into them, I had so much left for myself. It didn't happen overnight. There was no sudden montage of me in sunglasses, getting promoted, dating a supermodel. Real life doesn't work that way. But the shift was real and lasting. The first real change came quietly. I'd been working on a side project for months, a machine learning tool for automating customer support analysis. Nerdy, I know, but it had real value. I posted a short video demo on LinkedIn. Not expecting much. By noon, the video had over 3,000 views. By Friday, 27,000. A week later, a startup accelerator asked if I was open to pitching the tool at an upcoming tech showcase. Me pitching. A year ago, I would have hesitated. But now I knew better. I said yes. I spent 2 weeks preparing that pitch like my life depended on it. I trimmed the fat, polished the UI, practiced my timing. I even rented a decent jacket. It wasn't about looks, not really. It was about reclaiming self-respect. The day of the showcase, I walked into that room full of polished founders with one thought: you have nothing to prove to anyone but yourself. I nailed the pitch. 15 minutes, no stumbles. By the time I walked off stage, I already had 2 people handing me cards. A week later, a small angel investor was ready to write a check for $50,000 for early equity. I couldn't believe it. Well, I could. I'd built it. I knew the value. But for once, I let myself enjoy the moment. Not because I wanted my parents to finally say, "We're proud of you," but because I was proud of me. And that was new. I used part of the money to upgrade my apartment. Not move, just enhance. A proper standing desk, ergonomic chair, a beast of a machine. My home began to feel less like a holding cell and more like a headquarters. I started taking care of myself in other ways. Therapy again, this time with someone who specialized in adult children of emotionally manipulative families. I hit the gym not out of shame, but because it felt good. I read books, cooked real meals, took long walks at sunset without checking my phone. Bit by bit, I was building a life where I didn't just survive. I existed. And the best part? No one in my family knew. I had gone dark, quiet, off the grid. And it was the most peaceful silence I'd ever experienced. I expected Eleanor or Caleb to try again. Another guilt message. But nothing came. Maybe they finally realized I wasn't bluffing. Or maybe, more likely, they just assumed I'd circle back eventually, like I always had. After all, that's what I did, right? I was the stable one. But I wasn't that person anymore. And eventually, I knew I'd have to show them. I didn't plan for the opportunity to come when it did. It was about 6 months after I launched the product, Query Pulse. We landed a pilot deal with a mid-tier SaaS company. Not earth-shattering money, but enough to hire 2 contractors. One was an old college friend, Sarah, a sharp UX designer. The other, a quiet back-end dev. Within weeks, we were moving like a real team. Momentum built fast. Users came in, feedback too. I set up a newsletter, a blog, even started recording small video tutorials. Not flashy, but clear, useful, honest. The kind of thing I would have needed when I was starting out. That's when the podcast invites began. Small shows at first. One host, a guy named Liam who ran Bits and Pieces, asked me to do a deep dive on solo founder resilience. It was supposed to be a 30-minute chat. We talked for 2 hours. It was the most open I'd ever been publicly about burnout, manipulation, and the emotional cost of carrying other people's failures. I didn't name names, but I told the truth, that I used to think being strong meant never saying no, that guilt had kept me tethered to people who drained me, that walking away wasn't abandonment. It was survival. When the episode dropped, I expected quiet feedback. Instead, it exploded. I got emails, dozens, from people who saw themselves in my story. A founder whose brother kept stealing from his company. A woman who'd spent 20 years covering her father's debts. It hit something real. I hadn't meant to become a voice for anyone. I just wanted to breathe. But now that I had, others were breathing, too. Around this time, I got a message on LinkedIn from someone with a familiar last name. A recruiter from the company Caleb had tried to impersonate me at. He said simply, "We spoke with someone last year who misrepresented themselves. Thanks for flagging it. If you ever want to talk about opportunities, the door's open." I politely declined. I wasn't looking to be an employee anymore. But I did smile when I read it, because that was justice. Not revenge, not spite. Truth. And the truth, when you stand in it long enough, becomes armor. Still, I didn't reach out to my family. Even as I grew, even as Query Pulse gained traction, even as I started getting invites to speak at tech conferences, I stayed quiet. Because I didn't need their applause. I didn't need them at all. But life, as always, has a sense of timing you can't predict. One Sunday morning, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. Subject: Your family wants to talk. Attached was a scanned wedding invitation. Caleb's wedding. To a woman I'd never heard of. In 3 weeks. No RSVP link, no personal message, no note from Eleanor. Just my name, the date, and a reminder that family is forever. And that's when I knew they needed something. Because if they truly wanted to reconcile, they'd have picked up the phone, written a letter, showed remorse. But this? This was a baited hook. And I had no intention of biting. Still, I wasn't going to ignore it. Because sometimes the best way to reclaim your story is to show up on your own terms. And this wedding, oh, it was going to be the perfect stage. Not for revenge. Not for drama. But for truth. Because the man they expected to walk in through those doors, the quiet, agreeable brother who never made waves, he was gone. And in his place, someone who didn't need their approval to be whole. Let's talk about the wedding. But first, let me be clear. I had no intention of going. Not at first. When that email landed in my inbox, I almost laughed. After everything they'd done, they thought I'd show up to smile for pictures. But as I sat there, a realization hit me. They weren't inviting me because they missed me. They were inviting me because they needed me. And that's when I knew this wasn't just a wedding. It was a setup. A stage for Caleb to finally win. The prodigal failure returns triumphantly, now mature, responsible, married. And me? I was meant to be a silent extra in the background. Look, even Ethan came, they'd say, as if the broken relationships and betrayal had all just been silly misunderstandings that time had healed. But time hadn't healed anything. It had sharpened everything. So I said yes. Not with a reply. I clicked print, circled the date, and tacked it to my corkboard like it was a deadline. Because I wasn't just going to that wedding. I was going prepared. And I wasn't going as Ethan, the quiet, responsible older brother. I was going as me. The first thing I did was a little digging. If I was walking into enemy territory, I needed intel. So, I went to where all family secrets eventually leak, Facebook. Eleanor still had me blocked. So did Caleb. But Aunt Carol was still wide open, and a habitual oversharer. Her timeline was a goldmine. Photos, status updates, cryptic subtweets about some people forgetting where they came from. It was all there. But the real nugget came from a comment thread beneath a blurry photo of Caleb holding a wineglass on what looked like a hotel balcony. A friend commented, "Wow, big spenders. Is that the 4 Winds?" To which Aunt Carol proudly replied, "Yes, wedding and honeymoon all in one, courtesy of a very generous family friend." That made my eyebrow twitch. Caleb getting married at the 4 Winds? That was a luxury resort north of Denver. Ocean view suites. Michelin-starred catering. Not exactly, I'm 3 months behind on rent money. So, who is this generous family friend? I googled the venue. Bookings were listed publicly. The weekend of the wedding was blocked for a private party under the name Sterling Holdings. And that's when the puzzle clicked. Sterling Holdings was owned by Robert Bob Sterling, one of Arthur's old golf buddies. I remembered him. Bald, loud, always boasting about being self-made, even though his first 4 properties were gifts from his father. Sterling had money, influence, and evidently a soft spot for Caleb. I dug deeper. Turns out Caleb had been interning, unpaid, of course, at one of Sterling's smaller property firms. With all the Instagram posts, you'd think he was running the company. I even found a quote in a local business article where Sterling referred to him as a promising young leader. My jaw clenched. That was my phrase. I'd once used it to describe a junior dev during a podcast episode. Word for word. He was still stealing from me. But now he was wearing it as a costume, polished, rebranded, and preparing to walk down the aisle in a tailored suit paid for by a man who probably thought he was investing in the next tech entrepreneur. I stared at the screen. Then I smiled. He was bluffing. Caleb's entire empire was made of borrowed phrases, borrowed money, and borrowed time. All I had to do was pull the right thread. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked quietly. I didn't announce anything. Didn't tell my friends. I simply got to work. First, I built a portfolio site for myself. Clean, elegant, professional. Then I uploaded every major project I'd ever worked on, especially the ones Caleb had borrowed on his resume. Each entry was time-stamped, backed up with Git logs, original client contracts, and screenshots. Next, I wrote a short blog post called How to Spot a Fake Founder. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't bitter. It was helpful, educational, the kind of post that quietly dismantles people like Caleb without naming names. But the examples were very specific, same tools, same phrases, same projects. Then I tagged it with SEO terms like Query Pulse, B2B fraud, and yes, Sterling Holdings. I didn't need it to go viral. I just needed one person from Sterling's network to read it. And I made sure that would happen. I emailed a copy of the post under a pseudonym to the Sterling Holdings press email with a polite message that said, "Thought you might want to vet your next rising star." Integrity is everything in real estate, isn't it? No signature, just a digital whisper in the right ear. The wedding was held on a Saturday. Hot, humid, and smug. I wore a charcoal gray suit. No tie, clean shave, hair slicked back. I arrived 10 minutes early. The venue was beautiful, I won't lie. Flower arches, ivory linens, gold-plated cutlery. Caleb had gone all in. Or rather, Sterling had. I walked in alone. No date, no entourage. Just me, and the version of myself they never bothered to see. Eleanor spotted me first. She was near the reception table, clutching a clipboard like a stage manager. When her eyes landed on me, I saw it. That flicker. Surprise. Panic. A desperate mental scramble to figure out why I was there. But she smiled. Too wide. "Ethan," she said, walking over. "You made it. That means a lot." "Sure," I said calmly. "Wouldn't miss it." I watched her scan my outfit, my posture, my eyes. She was looking for a crack, for a tell, something to confirm her suspicion that I hadn't come in peace. But I gave her nothing. Just a serene smile and a sip of champagne. She gestured toward the seating chart. "You're at table 9, near the back, but a great view of the dance floor." Of course, I was. Table 9 was practically behind a pillar. My card had a typo. Ethane. I smiled. They were still playing games. But not for long. The ceremony began. Guests settled. Caleb walked down the aisle beaming, arm in arm with his bride, a woman I'd never met, wearing a $10,000 dress and a look of curated joy. The vows were flowery, rehearsed, full of vague promises about growth and honesty. I nearly choked on my champagne. Then came the reception. Drinks, dancing, speeches. Arthur gave a bland toast. Eleanor told a story about Caleb's resilience. And then the microphone passed to Caleb himself. He stepped up, tapped the mic, cleared his throat. "I just want to say," he began, "that none of this would have been possible without the people who believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. Robert Sterling, for taking a chance on me. My parents, for supporting me through every twist and turn. And my beautiful wife, for seeing the man I could become." He paused, then smiled in my direction. "And even my brother Ethan, who I may not always see eye to eye with, but who's always been an example of hard work and consistency. We don't say it enough, but I admire you, man." A polite smattering of applause. For a moment, it almost seemed sincere. Until I saw his smirk as he handed the mic back. That's when I knew he wasn't thanking me. He was using me, painting the narrative publicly, positioning himself as the grown-up, the one who'd made peace. The one who'd turned it all around. The guests clapped. Eleanor nodded, misty-eyed, and Caleb looked at me like he'd won. That's when the projector screen flickered on behind him. The room quieted, and there it was, a slideshow. Photos of the couple, childhood memories. Caleb's work, including a slide, oh yes, of one of my projects labeled as his. My pulse slowed. I stood up, walked calmly toward the AV table, and tapped the tech guy on the shoulder. Switch to this, I said, handing him a USB. Per the groom's instructions. Updated presentation. He hesitated, then nodded. I stepped back. The screen changed from a photo of Caleb at a laptop to a screen capture of my website. QueryPulse.com, timestamps, screenshots, contracts. And at the bottom, a side-by-side comparison of Caleb's LinkedIn profile and mine. Every phrase he'd copied. Every project he'd renamed. Silence fell, then gasps. The screen changed again, this time to the blog post, How to Spot a Fake Founder. A beat. And then Robert Sterling stood up, walked over to Caleb, and whispered something in his ear. Caleb's face turned gray, then red, then a weird pale yellow, like someone who's just realized the floor beneath them was never solid. He turned toward me, jaw slack. I tilted my head, raised my glass, and toasted. To truth. To peace. To walking away not as a victim, but as a man who finally knew his own worth. The fallout wasn't loud. That's what surprised me most. It was quiet. No screaming, no wine glasses flying. Just silence. After the final slide faded, and the last murmurs died down, the wedding reception stumbled forward like a drunk, trying to remember the steps of a dance. Someone turned off the screen. The music started again, tentative, confused. Waiters brought out dessert trays as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. Caleb disappeared. He left the mic on the floor and walked out through the side doors. I watched him go, then sat back down and ate the lemon tart like it was the most natural thing in the world. Across the room, Eleanor stood frozen, her face stuck between fury and shame. She didn't approach me. Just gripped her wine glass, eyes darting to the door Caleb had vanished through. Then to me. Aunt Carol looked like someone had yanked the emergency brake on her worldview. Arthur stayed seated. Didn't say a word. Eventually, Eleanor came over. Her heels clacked against the marble floor like accusations. She didn't sit, just hovered. You couldn't let him have one day, she said. Didn't he already have every day? I met her eyes, calm. Her mouth opened, closed. I kept going. He stole from me, lied about me, tried to break into my home. You ignored all of that. And now you're mad because I told the truth? You embarrassed him, she snapped, voice trembling. In front of everyone. He embarrassed himself, I said. I just held up the mirror. She stood there a moment longer, then without another word, turned and walked away. That was the last time we spoke. The next week, my phone stayed quiet. No family calls, no texts, no attempts at damage control. They'd closed ranks. I expected it. What I didn't expect was what came next. 3 days after the wedding, I got an email from Robert Sterling's assistant. Polite, short, Mr. Sterling would like to schedule a brief call to discuss a potential consulting opportunity. He was very impressed with your work. I blinked, reread it 3 times, then exhaled through a laugh. Of course, because while Caleb was licking his wounds, Sterling had done what any businessman does when his investments collapse. He looked for a better one. We set up the call. It lasted 15 minutes. He asked smart questions. I gave clear answers. He said he'd read my blog post, recognized the problem, and wanted to explore a partnership between QueryPulse and a portfolio of his companies. Nothing official yet, but a few introductions could go a long way. When we hung up, I just sat there, thinking about how far I'd come and how far I was going. Weeks turned into months. Caleb resurfaced eventually, quietly, with a new job title at a smaller company. His LinkedIn went private for a while. The next time I checked, his bio had changed dramatically. No more fake projects, no more buzzwords. Just a modest title, Customer Success Manager. No mentions of me. I knew he hated it, but I didn't gloat. Because I wasn't angry anymore. That was the true revenge. Not the slideshow, not the ruined wedding speech, but the fact that I had let go, and he couldn't. He was still trying to climb ladders he hadn't earned. I was building my own tower. Eleanor never reached out. I got a Christmas card from Aunt Carol that year. Just a generic happy holidays with no personal note. A photo of her dog in a Santa hat. I laughed when I saw it. Not bitter, just amused. Arthur sent nothing. And Caleb, he never apologized. But I didn't need one. Because by then, I had something better. I had peace. Real peace. The kind you don't trade for proximity. The kind that comes from drawing lines and holding them even when it's lonely. Especially when it's lonely. And I had built a life that was mine, fully. The last time I saw any of them was by accident. 8 months later, at a small tech conference downtown. I was giving a talk on integrity in software development. A short Q&A followed. When I stepped off stage, I saw them. Eleanor and Caleb, standing near the exit. They didn't approach me, didn't smile. Just watched like I was a movie they didn't understand anymore. I met their eyes, not at once, then turned and walked the other way. Not out of spite. Not out of anger. But because I finally could. And as I stepped outside into the sun, my phone buzzed. An email from a VC firm in Boston. Subject line, interested in learning more about QueryPulse. I smiled, tucked the phone in my pocket, and kept walking. Not toward them. Not away from them. Just forward. On my own path, at my own pace. What would you have done differently at that dinner table?